All right, today we're tackling a question that seems, on the surface, pretty simple. As our oceans heat up, can fish just swim a little deeper to find some cooler water? It sounds like a no-brainer, but the real story is, well, it's way more complicated and honestly a lot more shocking than you'd expect.
So this is the big idea we're digging into. When the surface water gets a little too toasty, can fish just, pack their bags and head downstairs to the cooler, deeper levels? It feels like an obvious solution, right? But is it actually a real escape plan?
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at that simple idea, the Great Escape downwards. Then, we'll dive into a fascinating case study in the Mediterranean that really put this to the test and uncovered some pretty wild migrations. We'll find out what moving deeper really means for fish populations, how invasive species are completely changing the game, and finally, why there might not be any easy refuge down below after all.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about that really simple, super intuitive idea that got this whole thing started.
The logic seems totally solid, right? If your apartment gets too hot, you go down to the basement where it's cool. For a fish, it's the same principle. The ocean gets colder the deeper you go. So moving just a little bit deeper could be like swimming hundreds of miles north. It's like a built-in escape hatch to stay in their comfy temperature zone.
So to actually see if this was happening, scientists needed the perfect real-world laboratory. And they found it.
They focused on the eastern Mediterranean, and wow, what a place to study. It's a serious hotspot for global warming. The surface water there shot up by a massive 2.5 degrees Celsius in just 20 years. On top of that, it's one of the most invaded ecosystems on the planet. So the researchers dug into 2 decades of data, comparing fish surveys from the 90s with the late 2000s, keeping a close eye on 64 different species of bottom-dwelling fish.
So with the stage set like this, everyone kind of thought they knew what they were going to find. But you know how it is. Nature loves a good plot twist.
This simple prediction had a name, March Deep. The idea was that you'd see this nice, orderly retreat. Whole species would just pick up and shift their entire home range from their shallowest spot to their deepest spot down into cooler water, all together. A neat little march to the deep.
But what really happened was, well, anything but neat. Look at this. That March Deep idea, only about 16% of species actually did it. The biggest group, at 36%, just expanded their range, moving both deeper and shallower. And get this, another 16% did the exact opposite of what was expected and marched into shallower water. Add in another 20% whose habitats just shrank. I mean, this wasn't a march, it was pure chaos.
This chaotic picture brings up an even more important question. For those fish that did move deeper, was it actually helping them? Was it working?
And this chart shows what might be the most stunning finding of the entire study. The fish that expanded their range, their populations actually went up. But look at the March Deep group, the ones who did exactly what we thought they were supposed to do. Their populations, on average, plummeted. Moving deeper was a losing strategy.
So let's just let that sink in. For many of these local fish, moving deeper wasn't an escape plan, it was a sign of defeat. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Deeper water isn't just colder. There's less light, which means less food. There are different predators. The habitat, the seafloor itself, might be all wrong. The escape hatch led them to a room they just couldn't live in.
But wait, there's another huge layer to the story. It's not just about temperature. It's about a turf war between the old guard and some new arrivals.
So the researchers basically split the fish into 2 teams. First, you've got the 50 native or indigenous species. These are the locals, the ones who've been there forever. Then you've got the 14 newcomers, invasive species, most of them coming from the much warmer Red Sea, who are actually pretty happy about the water getting hotter.
For the locals, the situation is pretty grim. Their movements, as we saw, were all over the place. The native species that prefer cooler water were being pushed out of the shallows, and this forced move into deeper water was directly tied to their population shrinking. They're struggling, big time.
But for the invasive newcomers, it's a completely different story. Being warm water fish, they love the new conditions. For them, the dominant strategy was simple: expansion. Half of them just took over more territory. They aren't just surviving, they are absolutely thriving.
So what does all of this add up to? Well, that simple, almost hopeful idea of a safe haven waiting in the deep, turns out it's just a fantasy.
And the study's authors really summed it up perfectly. They wrote that deepening was not sufficient to offset the ecological impacts of global change.
In other words, just moving down wasn't enough. For a lot of the native species, it wasn't a refuge at all.
And that leaves us with a really sobering thought to end on. We've always pictured the deep ocean as this vast, stable, safe place. But if even the deep can't protect marine life from the changes happening up at the surface, what does the future really hold for our oceans?